Question. Hey Kim, I was wondering about situations where it's unavoidable to make karma. As an example, plastic is very bad for the environment and it negatively affects other people, which I'm guessing is a karma-making situation. It's basically impossible to live in the Western world without using plastics in some ways, like how almost all foods are now wrapped or in plastic containers. How does karma figure into this? Or is it better to just raise consciousness and invoke the violet flame? Thank you for your work. Yeah, that's a very good question, because what I have seen over the many years I've been on a spiritual path is that you have people, you grow up in a normal society, Western society for example, and you believe what you're brought up to believe, you live the way your parents live, and then at a certain point you have what I call a spiritual awakening, where you suddenly realize there's a spiritual side to life and it's possible to be much more conscious of the way we live and the way we do everything. And I have seen many people who, in that beginning phase, when you become aware there's a spiritual path, they go into various kinds of extremes. It's kind of like, I call it the experimental phase, the exploratory phase, where we have to look at whatever is out there, whatever alternative views, whatever alternative knowledge there is. We have to explore what that means for us individually. And you know, what you generally see is that we all start out being somewhat unbalanced about it. You know, we find a certain topic we're interested in, we really study it, and we tend to think in our lack of experience that this is going to save the world. And then as we keep walking the spiritual path, we gradually become more balanced. We realize that, yeah, maybe not using plastic or whatever it can be, living in a tiny house or whatever, is not going to save the world. So what I would say is that if you want to have a certain balance in this, Jesus actually made a very interesting statement 2,000 years ago. Because I can't remember the exact situation, what he was asked. Yeah, I think it was something about whether it was lawful for a spiritual person to pay taxes to Caesar. And what he said was, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. And what you could interpret that to mean is that we are living in a certain time, we are living in a certain society. And there are just certain things that are inevitable, that are just, it's there in our society. It doesn't mean that they can't be changed. But what we have to consider as spiritual people, what is in our life plan? Is it in our life plan that we, for example, spend an extraordinary amount of time and attention on avoiding plastic? Or is it more important that we focus our attention on spiritual growth, attaining Christhood? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't certain people who could have it in their life plan to change society and get us away from using so much plastic. I'm not saying that. But for most spiritual people, plastic isn't the main issue. Or, I mean, I'm using plastic as an example here, but it could be other things in society. Right? So, in other words, you can say, I am right now living in a certain society where, for practical reasons, it's not in my divine plan that I become an organic farmer and I grow my own food so that I can take it directly from the source and avoid having it wrapped in plastic. That's not my divine plan. My divine plan is something else. And as a result of that, I need to buy my food from the store. And for hygienic reasons, my society has decided that all foods need to be wrapped in hygienic containers, and for practical reasons, that means they are made out of plastic. And right now, that's just the way it is. So, I render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. I accept that there are certain conditions in the world. And I just need to take those conditions and use them as a foundation for my spiritual growth. And for discovering what is it in my divine plan to do in terms of society. And it may be that it is part of your divine plan to change something in society. I'm not saying it has to be get rid of plastic. It could be all kinds of things, right? But I'm just saying, again, if your divine plan is about improving education, it's not really your main issue here to deal with plastic, right? So therefore you can't spend your attention on it. You just have to accept these are the conditions I'm living in. And they're not ideal, and they're probably going to change over time, but I just have to make the best of it. And so what I'm trying to say with this is that I don't think, I'm not saying, plastic is bad for the environment and it negatively affects other people, which I'm guessing is a karma-making situation. I'm not saying it's not a karma-making situation, but I'm just thinking that karma is not so severe that it can derail you from fulfilling your divine plan. And therefore, you don't need to focus your attention on it. You just need to accept this is the way it is right now. And you accept that by raising your consciousness, you are raising the collective consciousness, and that means that we are moving towards a point where we either find an alternative to the way things are done right now, or we find whole new ways of doing it. Again, I don't want to focus on the plastic because there can be so many other things that are not ideal. And so, you see what I'm saying? It's a matter of finding that balance. What am I really here to accomplish in this lifetime? What are the important issues for me? And then the rest is just something you live with, make the best of it. And you can apply all kinds of situations or considerations here also. Plastic is very bad for the environment. Well, yes, obviously it is when it's concentrated in too big of a concentration in certain areas. But you have to realize also that it's like anything we can do here on Earth with a physical substance, there is an answer to it. There is a way to erase it. The Ascended Masters explain that all matter is made by these beings in the 4 levels of the material universe called elemental beings, and they are able to purify the Earth. I mean, even nuclear radiation can be purified. It takes a certain time, of course, but it can be purified. So there's really nothing that we can do with physical substances on Earth that can't be erased. So you have to be very careful not to get yourself into this doomsday consciousness where you think the world is going to end tomorrow or next week because people are doing this. Because this is not the Christ consciousness. This is the duality consciousness that wants to create this epic drama that unless we get rid of plastic, the whole planet is going to disintegrate, or life is going to be impossible, or whatever it is. So as a spiritual being, you need to reach for the Christ perspective and, as I said, have the balanced view. And you could also say, what was the case before all our food was wrapped in plastic? Was there, for example, more food poisoning because there was more bacteria in the food and this and that? So is that not also a karma-making situation if society said we are not going to use a material that could bring down illness and death because of some consideration? I'm just trying to show here that what I've seen in many spiritual people is that some people can get fixated on a certain issue and then they take a very unbalanced approach to it. And it's basically what I call in one of my ego dramas videos, I call these the epic dramas. And all of a sudden it's now, this issue is now the defining issue for the future of humanity. Like you saw with the corona pandemic. I mean, it's like the biggest issue on the planet is now vaccines or wearing a mask. And it's again this, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and unto God that which is God's. Focus on what is in your divine plan, focus on your spiritual growth, and just do whatever you need to do to get by in the physical life on earth. Now obviously this can also be taken too far, because I'm not saying that we should ignore that there are things that need to be changed. Obviously, if everybody ignores that a certain thing needs to change in society, well, it's not going to change, right? But I'm just saying, pick your battles. What is important for your divine plan, your individual life plan? And then don't be distracted from that by some kind of issue that, and what I've seen can happen to people is this, it's almost like well, it really is an ego reaction, because here you have a person, we grow up, we are told, we live in the most advanced society and everything is going well and you just need to live the way everybody lives. Then you discover there's an alternative view. There are actually many problems in our society that are not being addressed, whether it's climate change or pollution or diseases or this or that. And you suddenly see that what you were told was basically, it wasn't necessarily completely a lie, but it was a very selective view, and it's a very superficial understanding of life. So suddenly you realize there are really some deep issues that need to be changed. And the result of this for many spiritual people is that we feel overwhelmed and powerless, because there are so many things that need to change. So we often go through this period, as I said, we are exploring all of the alternative views out there. And like you see some people with conspiracy theories, they go into all these conspiracy theories and they end up feeling completely powerless and completely angry. Because what can you do about a conspiracy theory? If there's a hidden conspiracy, what can you do? They're hidden, right? By definition, a conspiracy theory, there isn't much you can do, other than maybe be angry at some other people or try to, I don't know, you can't even expose them if they're a secret conspiracy, right? So anyway, I'm just saying, many people have experienced that. You go into this blind alley, you just feel powerless, you feel frustrated, you feel angry. And that blocks your spiritual growth. So as a spiritual person, you really need to avoid this. But what you see with some spiritual people is that you go into this, you realize there's so many problems, and then you feel overwhelmed, but in order to avoid that feeling of being overwhelmed and powerless, you focus on one particular issue. And now you go into this epic mindset where you think, solving this particular problem is the essential issue on earth right now. And if we just solve that, we have saved the world. And, you know, again, I'm not saying it couldn't be your divine plan to work on that issue, but not from that state of mind where you are unbalanced about it, because that isn't really going to help solve the problem. That's only perpetuating the duality consciousness and the dualistic struggle. So that's why I'm saying we have to look at that reaction and see that this is just the ego that wants to give you the sense that you are doing something by focusing on this issue. But as I said, step back, use your intuition. What is in your divine plan? Are there issues you work on, or do you focus mainly on spiritual growth? What's important for you individually? I'm not trying to tell you what to do here. I'm just saying, you know, it is so easy to decide with the outer mind, oh, I can get a sense that I'm doing something. But is that really what you're here to accomplish?